Hello and welcome to the GAA Museum Virtual Book Club. Each month, the museum team will choose a well-known GAA book to read and review before hosting an online interview with the author. In April, we reviewed Last Man Standing by Christy O'Connor. Please enjoy this recording of the Q&A session. If you're not a member of the book club already, it's free to join at crokepark.ie/book club.
Thank you all so much for joining and for reading along. I'm absolutely delighted with this month's choice of book. I'm Julianne, by the way, for new attendees from the museum, and hopefully the museum will be open soon, but this has been a great way to keep us, I suppose, in touch with everybody and keep talking about GAA even while the matches haven't been going ahead. So I'm absolutely delighted. I think it was a bit of a change because our last couple of books were history books. And I suppose this one is a little different in that I suppose it's history now, but when it was published, it was, I suppose, living history. It's more, I suppose, an insight into what goes on behind closed doors in the GAA world, particularly in hurling world, with the focus on the unique person that is the hurling goalkeeper. And it's written in a really enjoyable way. And I suppose I gave us all, even if you weren't a hurling fan, even just a sports fan or a fan of psychology, I think it gave us a really good insight into the mindset of what it takes to perform at a high level, and I suppose a little bit on your own as well as a hurling goalkeeper, because it's slightly different than other players on the team. You get that sense throughout the book. So I'm delighted to welcome Christy. Can you hear me, Christy?
I can, Julianne. Just firstly, apologies. Very conspiracy. I'm trying to sort this out all day, and then it just, as we about to go live, the whole thing crashes. So apologies again to everybody.
It's no problem. This is the joy of lockdown. I'd absolutely love to be doing these book clubs in the museum. So hopefully we'll be able to do a couple when we open again, and you can join us for that. But I think we'll start straight into it. I have a whole lot of notes here. And as I say, if anyone has any problems hearing Christy, just let me know on the Q&A and I'll try and hook it up a bit better. I'm just leaving the phone here. Hopefully I have enough charge. I wasn't expecting this. The first thing I'm going to ask Christy is, how do you go about this? I can't imagine the number of interviews that you had to do.
Yeah, look, I suppose really, Julianne, just to give a bit of background to the idea, I suppose, I was lucky in a way that I probably would have played against some of these guys, and I was maybe off their time, in that, it would have been around the same age as a lot of them, maybe would have played against them underage, would have known some of them, and it's like everything, I suppose, really, the hurling community is relatively small. People know one another, and I suppose my main motivation was, I guess, a writer maybe, was try and get inside the dressing room, because I suppose really it's probably something that is a real challenge for a writer, for a journalist, to try and get in the door. And I know a lot of people have done it, right? So it was probably more so the American market as opposed to the Irish market. So I just wanted to maybe take the reader into the dressing room and to try and just give an insight. And I suppose really I felt the fact that I was a goalkeeper myself, that I would have known some of these guys, that I might have been able to develop a level of trust and empathy, and that they would, I suppose, give me the access. Like, I wasn't, not that I was going into the dressing room, with these lads before games or at training sessions, nothing like that. But I suppose, look, if I didn't have that trust with them, I suppose they wouldn't have been comfortable taking me in there.
Yeah.
So, and then taking me into their stories and through their experiences. So so that was my first motivation about how do you go write a book. So that I probably had a loose plan in my head. Like everything, plans go out the window when you start to write a book.
Yeah.
So and I did gamble a little bit, Chelsea. I suppose, look, I was very friendly with Dunham at the time. Still have good friends with Dunham, but I felt myself after Cork had lost the 3 All-Ireland final that I felt they were going to win. I just felt Cork were going to win it in 2004. So I suppose, look, the book started with Dunham, it finished with Dunham, and I suppose, like, there was one when Cork played Tip in the qualifiers in Killarney in that July. They lost the Munster final, like, and I never shouted for Cork as much at the time, because I just felt, if Cork were over here now, I'm kind of in a bit of trouble, because I kind of staked so much on kind of Cusick dominating this book.
Yeah.
So like, that's just, I suppose, the way you know, a book evolves, develops, and you take a bit of a chance. And look at, like you said, a lot of interviews, and there would have been interviews that I would have done. Like, there was one chapter that I did on, maybe it was probably early in the book, on the life of a sub goalie, which I know all about myself.
Yeah.
And you know, there was like, people were so giving and of their time and so helpful and, you know, so genuine. And like, there were some of those chapters that didn't actually make the cut. Like, and that's one thing I suppose really, I look back at it, Julianne, that I would be a little bit regretful, you know, that some of those people that did give me their time, and, you know, maybe might have been a little bit disappointed that they weren't in the book. But, you know, it's like everything, you know, you probably have a loose kind of a plan in your head, and then word counts maybe go overboard, or editors are telling you to cut back stuff, and so yeah, like some of those guys didn't make it. But like, to answer your go back to the first part of your question, that was my motivation. I just wanted to take the reader into the dressing room, and then I suppose looking off I went, and you know, didn't really know where it was going to take me, but it ended up, I suppose, it started with Dorlogue and it finished with Dorlogue, and a lot of stories and a lot of you know, a lot of insight along the way.
Yeah, there really is, and Dorlogue's obviously a huge character in the book, and an interesting character as well. But what struck me was maybe some of the stories about maybe the lesser known, I suppose, for the less successful counties, like the Down goalkeeper. I think he's probably my favourite in the whole book, and it's actually heartbreaking that he never gets to Croke Park, and things like a decision to play the American football game in Croke Park, and you know, then another match been moved to Gaelic grounds, and you don't think of things, you're just thinking in terms, you know, as a hurling fan, obviously after your own county, you're just thinking of, you know, who's going to win the All-Ireland. I just thought that was heartbreaking, and there was some really heartbreaking stories in it, you know, lads. You when you're looking as an outsider, you don't think of the personal stories, and I think there's an awful lot of sports biographies, but and autobiographies, but this had just something else. I think it was the access, and people were so honest with you, and the honesty maybe wouldn't come now. So that was one thing that struck me. Like, do you think if you went to write it now, are players, particularly from the more successful counties, are they too well media trained now? Would you get that access now, or is the landscape just too different?
No, Julia, I definitely wouldn't get that access now, which is understandable the way the modern game is evolving. I suppose with social media, and everything else, you know, like, it's just a different time. And as I said at the start, you know, I was lucky that I knew a lot of these guys. I was on their time.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not of any modern goalkeeper's time at the moment. And you know, you know, everything moves on. But you know, so the one thing that I probably had as an advantage, and I don't want to be, you know, saying that I played at an okay level, but I suppose looking, I probably had that kind of connection with a lot of the lads. And even like Olivia, my wife, she was my girlfriend at the time, and she would often hear me that I might be on phone to one of the lads maybe after a game, and you know, she might be in the other room, and she said to me after, like, that was, you know, like a counselling session, and then like that, you know, they might have been hopping stuff off me, or they might have been saying, look, I'm struggling here, you know, I'm not maybe playing that well, or, you know, kind of indirectly maybe asking me for my advice on, like, who am I to tell some of these guys what to do. But I suppose they probably just appreciated as well that they were talking to a goalkeeper as well as a writer, and you know, that they were just maybe able to connect that bit more. Maybe they were able to be that bit more honest and that bit more forthcoming. And you know, like we say, you know, you asked there about the Down goalkeeper Graham Clark. Like, Graham was actually a great friend of mine. Like, I wouldn't have probably known him that well at the time, but I suppose, you know, like, Graham, like, is probably a reflection of a lot of inter-county players that, you know, even though he was obviously he's playing for Down, he trained as hard as any goalie. He trained as hard as David Fitz or Damien Fitzhenry, Brendan Cummins, as all these guys. And it's just, I suppose that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to show that there are guys out there, not just goalkeepers. And it's the same in the modern game. There are players out there in Joe McDonough in Division 3, 4 football.
Yeah.
They put as much into this as the guys in Division 1 or the guys playing in the Lee McCarthy or the top players, the high profile and the, you know, all the experience and that have the All-Ireland medals. You know, it's just the nature of the beast that it's only maybe the top guys often that get recognised. But that was a big part of the book for me too, Julian.
Yeah.
I wanted to kind of pay, you know, show respect and to kind of honour those lads as well and to make sure that they weren't forgotten about. And I think, you know, you would say, you know, you mentioned Graham, and I think Graham really, you know, emerged kind of a hero out of that book in a way because, you know, people could see his love and his passion for the game and you know,
just even the physicality, the driving that he did, you know, to go to matches and, you know, people mightn't have seen them as important games to be, you know, driving around the country for, but he did it and like couldn't understand why you wouldn't do it. That, you know, it's just what you do, and it was in him, I suppose. I was fascinated by him, and I didn't know a whole lot about him beforehand, so it 100% came across, you know, as an honour to those. And I also liked the way you kind of, the mantle, I suppose, is passed on maybe from an older goalkeeper that's retiring to the next one, and they still go to each other for advice. Like that seemed to happen in a number of counties, and also even between goalkeepers. Like Liam Donoghue from Galway rang Donlow Cusack before a match to talk about how you deal with Henry Shefflin. You know, I thought that was amazing, and I hadn't really thought of goalkeepers as a group of friends or comrades. There's a real sense of camaraderie between them, you know, outside of their team. I thought it was very interesting.
Yeah, well, like I suppose it's probably the modern player, I suppose, really, like between colleges now, it's probably a lot more players go to third level college now. They're playing given together. They're meeting a lot more opportunities, a lot more opportunities than, you know, like I suppose like that book was based on the 2004 season. So like a lot of the time back then there was no social media. You know, players might only meet maybe, you know, they might meet at an All-Stars event.
Yeah.
You know, that's when they might have talked. So I suppose back then it was nearly a case of, you know, it was nearly a bit more innocent, Julianne, to be honest with you.
That did come across,
I don't know, would players from other counties pick up the phone now and ring a guy that they might be playing because, you know, maybe they feel they might be given away. So I don't know, and like, look, I can't speak for players, but there was probably that, as you said, there was probably that maybe innocence back then in that, you know, players were more, maybe more vulnerable and, you know, were just that bit more, how would you put it, just looking for an edge, but looking for, you know, like go straight to the keeper that they respected and asked him straight out. And like, I don't know, would if that happened now, would the players maybe, because you said they're media trained, they're more guarded, you know, would they see, well, if I tell him something now, that might come back to haunt me, so.
Yeah, or someone hears about it and puts it on social media, and it's a different time for sure. And it's even interesting the way in the book, like after most of the games, the opposing goalkeepers sought each other out. You know, you probably don't notice that as a fan, but you just see the team celebrating. But I thought that was interesting, and I think even Donlow said when against Brenner, he felt for him even during the match when he had a bad save, and you kind of think, gosh, you don't think of that. You don't really see a goalkeeper as human in some ways, and this book certainly humanises them.
Yeah, look at it. It is a brotherhood, really, Julianne, in that, I suppose, look at, you probably have to be a bit mad now to be a hurling keeper. You know, consider all that's going on, and like I always say, you know, look at every player that goes out, you know, hurling, football, whatever sport, you know, look at, you have so much respect, especially for the guys that play at the top level, that, you know, when you consider the pressure out, the height, the expectation, you know, even the demand from supporters on social media. So but really, you know, I always say that if you're a hurling goalie and you're going out to play in an All-Ireland final and you were to actually think of what could go wrong or what could happen, like you would drive yourself, crazy. And I think that the one thing I would always feel about the top players, and especially the top goalies more than anything, I think it's not always the best. They're not the guys that are the best. They're not always maybe the best players.
Yeah.
They're probably the mentally strongest. And like to be a goalie, you have to be so mentally strong. And I think that brotherhood that you spoke about there is probably formed from that there's a real acknowledgement and an acceptance of how hard this can be, like,
yeah.
and how hard this trade is, how much pressure is on you, how much of a risk, you take every time you play there.
Yeah.
And I think that, players that just really respect that, like, and they really, just, I suppose, look at they just know the other side, but like, that we all see, everyone acknowledges the great saves and everything else, but like it's the real heartbreak, and like I know myself, the real torture, like mental torture you can go through as a goalie. Even if you're suffering, if you're going through a bad day in a form and you're struggling with your game, and
yeah.
there's no margin for error, like it can be an awful place. And I think you probably only have to live that and experience it to understand it. And I think that there's probably that greater level of understanding amongst keepers, especially hurling goalies, considering the risks like that. Like even something as small, Julianne, is playing. When you're playing hurling now, right, and you're playing into a blinding sunlight, like it can be an absolute nightmare. You are living on your wits a bit, and you are, it's like you can, if you lose that ball for a millisecond, like you lose the fly of it, it's in the net, like, and
yeah.
like, people don't understand. They don't understand that. That's not a criticism. It's just that you're playing on the edge so much, like the high ball comes into the square, keeper goes up, maybe the full back and the full forward will be trying to contest in front of them. They might take a glance off the hurley, and it's up in the net. Everybody thinks of what was the goalie at, like, and it really is. It's a crazy position, and I think the other side of that as well is that often with a goalies will tell you this, that it's not always the good save or the flashy save that the keepers get the most satisfaction on. It's like catching a ball against the sun, or catching a ball that's going over the crossbar when you're playing against a really strong wind, or
yeah.
Or getting your first touch when you come out and you maybe have to go through a cluster of players, and that's the stuff that the goalies really, maybe that's what they get more satisfaction out of it. And I think that the other goalies recognise that as well, and they understand, how hard this stuff can be to pull off.
Yeah, I think I might be able to see you here. I'm just going to see, are you coming in here? I think your computer might be working, Christy. So this would be amazing.
Yeah.
Haha.
Yeah, I've got a great assistant here, Julianne.
She's doing well. Can you unmute yourself and I'll turn you off on the phone then?
You've muted us.
I can't unmute you. I think you have to unmute yourself. It won't let me unmute you. I think it automatically muted you there when you joined. Might be up the top right there.
No. Julia, just 1 second. Might come back to it, okay?
Yeah, we'll keep going if you want to. Yeah. And then, yeah, you work away there and we'll keep going.
This thing just comes and it goes again.
No bother. No, it's working fine anyway. So it's no bother. Yeah, I'll leave you up there, and if I see it might.
Yeah, you see me, yeah.
Yeah, if I see you, I'll let you. It might work. Might work now. Try it again now. You're gone on that. We'll keep going. I have actually I have a load of questions here, but I have a couple of questions from coming in on the chat here. So there's a couple here, and actually this I did want to talk about. From Joe, it says, was shocked at Christy's insight into goalkeepers' abuse by supporters. I'm presuming that he would have known this firsthand, and they seem to take the brunt of it compared to the outfield players, which I suppose is I suppose you do have first-hand knowledge, and I suppose goes with the territory of standing in the one place. You're not moving around the field, so you can actually hear what the people are saying.
Well, yeah, like look, I think goalies probably they block out that stuff, and you know you have to like to learn how to deal with that stuff. Like, but you know, it's really, I think the best players, as I said, Julianne, are mentally strongest. Like, and if you were to maybe listen to some of the stuff that's coming off the terraces, or listen to some of the, you know, and look at that's the nature of the beast as well as supporters, that they want to maybe just rattle you, and the goalie's the handiest target because he's standing there, and you know, look, I would have even seen it myself at club level, like you know, sometimes, you know, it's maybe something small. It might only be one guy that, or one person that might say something to you, and it might just get you, it might, you know, turn you off. You might start thinking about something that you shouldn't be thinking about, you know. You're losing your train of thought, you're losing your focus.
Yeah.
But like, you know, you like multiply that by, let's say, down in Thurles when you're towards the line and end, and like maybe 10,000 fans behind you, like, and look at, there's no, like, especially with a crowd like that, they sense vulnerability, like they're like lines, like any bit of you know, weakness, they really go to town. And look at, they do the same with outfield players as well, but for the goalie, you know, you've no choice, you've got to stand there and you've got to deal with it. And you know, look at, it can be a lonely place, but as I said, guys who can handle this, and the girls play camogie the best. That's why they're the best at their trade, you know.
Yeah, it was, some of it was like hard to read, and you know, because we do pride ourselves on you know, even on the tours in Croke Park, we would always mention you know, the fact that, you know, players can, or that fans can sit beside each other, you know, and so it was very tough to hear as a GAA fan. So I thought, oh, I see you're trying to come back in here again now. I might be able to do it. Right, to present. Sorry, everybody. It would be great if we could see you, so we'll try. I think you're on mute, but if you can unmute, I think it's ready to work now.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. I'm going to put, everyone's probably sick looking at me, so I'm going to put you on there now instead of me. Now I think everyone can see it. Someone might say in the chat box there if they can, that would be great. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. Brilliant. That's brilliant. It's nice to see your face. And I'm less struggling around all my notes and phones now and everything too. So that's brilliant. So yeah, I thought the stuff about the family, you know, the abuse maybe that the family members had to take on the sidelines was hard. I know Donald mentioned his sister, you know, when she was wearing his jersey, one of his jerseys, and that must get to players more maybe even than themselves.
Yeah, I think so. Look, I think players are conditioned to dealing with it. They're comfortable, not comfortable, but they know how to deal with it, I suppose. And it's probably just that bit more personal when you maybe hear, like, Don Logan heard about his sister, and you know, like, people, I suppose that incident that a few guys maybe just copped who she was and kind of went after her, like, so you know, and she had no experience of how to deal with that. So yeah, like, it's tough, but look, I think it's the same for every family that have somebody that play at that level, Julianne, that, you know, you're going to hear stuff you don't really want to hear. You're going to hear stuff that you're not going to like.
Yeah.
And I think it's the same. I think that's the hardest part for players, especially amateur players. You know, I'm not saying that it's any easier for professional players, but I think it's easier to justify for the professional players when they're getting well paid. Like, whereas the amateur players, they're going out and they're representing their county, and they're
And they have to go back into the community the next day. That's hard, you know, and you probably sometimes don't want to. And it was funny in some ways and awful in others, but the taxi drivers getting caught out because they probably don't even believe half of what they're saying. They're just making conversation and you know, saying what the topic was for the day in the taxi. And it happened to a couple of the players.
Taxi drivers definitely don't come out well out in the book anyway.
No.
there's you know, Stevie Brenner and Dawn Logue, like they like, you know, like I don't know, I retell the stories just for the crack, like, but
it was light relief, but you know, I can see how that it gets you, and you do need to be mentally strong. And I know they have their, you know, psychologists and all of that, but as you say, it's an amateur game, and you know, they do need to be looked after. And then there was some heartbreaking things. There's a Tommy Cohen from Galway. That was a very sad kind of end to what could have been a huge career.
Yeah, like Tommy's actually Johnny's father, Johnny, who plays for.
Yeah, I was thinking that. Yeah.
And I actually, the day I interviewed Tommy, I went up to meet him in Loughrea, just outside Loughrea, and Johnny was actually there that day. He was only a very small boy, like, and you know, we're talking to Johnny before about that interview, like, and he said, I remember you coming up to the house that day, like, so even just a little connection like that. You know, like I think Johnny and maybe for somebody like Tommy, who would have been, I suppose, the great white hope of Galway goalkeeping at the time, and you know, unfortunately, he lost the sight in one of his eyes, got a belt to the slither in a training game in Limerick. So I think it's nice as well, Julianne, to acknowledge and to you know, let people know who some of these players were and what they went through. And Tommy had a tough time afterwards, like, you know, trying to adjust, you know, was really kind of, I suppose, turned his life upside down. That he was a guy that could have played in Galway and goals for Galway for 10 years. You know, Galway won a couple of All-Irelands. Like, look at John Cummins was a great keeper for Galway. You know, Tommy said he never begrudged John Cummins, you know, what he achieved, but I suppose it's all maybe that doubt at the back of his mind, of those questions, like, could that have been me, like, you know. So it's nice for maybe people that wouldn't have known about Tommy to read about him and to maybe understand the background. And you know, he didn't just disappear off the scene for no reason. Like, there was a really good reason that he lost the sight in his eye because of a belt of a ball, you know.
Yeah, and that's an interesting thing too. You know, there is speculation about a lot of these, and I suppose the goalie is such a high-profile position as well. It's obvious if they're changed straight away when the team started. As Brenner said, people had said he had a nervous breakdown, and that's why he was dropped. Like, the rumours fly, and this just really showed how close, I suppose, to the bone it can be. And your family are coming home here and things and taking it personally and wondering if it's true. So it's definitely a tough station. So why do they do it, I suppose? Like, I know you could ask that of all GAA players, but what drives the goalkeepers? Why would you pay that? Why would you put yourself through it?
Well, look, I suppose it's like anything in life. We'll say, like, if you know, people do jobs, and I'd say, how do they do that job? You know, people say, why would you be a goalie? But it's like anything, you do it because you love it. And you know, I suppose really, it's you don't think about these things, I think, Julianne. You know, you just do it. And like we say, I think it takes a certain type of character. To be a goalie, but like there's obviously a reason why you do it as well. You know, you maybe like playing on the edge, you maybe like the element of risk, and even though there's a lot of, you know, maybe the potential for risk outweighs the potential for reward, I still think that that's the attraction too. Like, that, you know, you can be the hero, like, you can be the guy that saves the day, or the girl who saves the day. You know, you can do something incredible. You know, like, you can stop a rocket from like 10 yards, it'll win you an All-Ireland. And you know, maybe that those people will see that like or the goalies see that like it's the same as scoring the winning point or scoring the winning goal. Just maybe that's the attraction, that living on the edge, that's the type of character you have to be to play there.
Yeah. No, yeah, and the personality types are interesting too. There's some great characters in the book, which we might come back to. And I'm just thinking as well of living on the edge. I feel like that every time the book club is about to start and the technology is not working.
Exactly.
So I have another question here. Book shows the 2 and even 3 tier system in hurling, and is there ever going to be a more level playing field for the weaker counties? Would Christy have any reason to be optimistic that this could ever change, or is this the status quo?
Well, look, I do think that I do think the system is it's as good as it can be at the moment, Julianne, because like there's no point putting counties like we say that are down maybe 17, 18 in the pecking order in playing against the likes of Limerick or Galway or Cork or Tip. It's so like that they can go up to their own level. Like obviously now it's a bit different in Leinster this year in that you have there was no relegation from the Joe McDonagh last year, so Antrim are there. Like I think that's what people were crying out for in Leinster was, like it was the Joe McDonagh champions were kind of yo-yoing up and down, and really get an opportunity to consolidate. Like the Carlow were a classic example of having made massive progress in the Joe McDonagh, in the Christy Ring before that, and then they come up and suddenly they're playing, Kilkenny, Dublin, Galway, Wexford. Look at any team in Leinster, doesn't matter. Even any team in Munster that would go into that group would find it hard to consistently beat those teams. So so Carlow then came up and they were straight back down. And I think it's good now that you're going to have this year. There's one of those like the likes of we'll say Laois, who came up from the Joe McDonagh 19 and who brilliant summer that year, beat Dublin. Antrim came up last year. Fairness, played really well in the final, or played really well to win the final. But they have a chance now. One of those teams is not going to be yo-yoing back down straight away. So I know Laois were there last year, and I think it's the same for the Christy Ring, and like for Offaly, for example, this was one of the saddest parts for a lot of hurling people is to see where Offaly have fallen. Now, that's I think Offaly they're an example at the moment how they're trying to go about getting back up. Even we saw Shane Lowry last week. Michael Dignan seems to be a brilliant chairman. They've accepted that they're playing the long game. They're trying to get back up. But Offaly are there for a reason too, Julianne. Like they were relegated from the Joe McDonagh. They couldn't get back up from the Christy Ring last year. So they can't really have any complaints. People say, well, Offaly should be in the Leinster Championship. Obviously they're not there for a reason. So I suppose really the system is kind of like a tiered system for a reason. And I think it's the fairest because even the Joe McDonagh, like the first year of the Joe McDonagh, it was an unbelievable championship, and everyone was nearly beating one another, and there was tight games. And I suppose the great pity about the Joe McDonagh over the last few years has been the lack of profile, as in none of those games are getting televised apart from the final. Even I suppose the Leinster final and the Munster final were on the same day. The Joe McDonagh was the curtain raiser to the Leinster final. So with all due respect, nobody's going to watch, even if you're in Croke Park for the Leinster final and the Joe McDonagh is the curtain raiser. If you're there in Croke Park, you're probably going to go into, if you get access to a TV, you're going to watch the Munster final. That's no criticism of the Joe McDonagh. So that's just the way it is. So I suppose I think that's the biggest challenge, is to find to maybe increase the profile. And I do think that more has to be done to help those counties and to try and get more support around them. And I suppose that's probably not going to happen anytime soon now with the way things have been over the last year, and with funds and with money and all that. But look at it. It is you look at the Liam McCarthy though. Look at the counties now and how even that competition is compared to maybe even what it was 10 years ago when Tip and Kilkenny were kind of running it really. They were, even though you had a lot of competitive counties,
Yeah.
You could tell from the start of the year that like 09, 10, 11, you could kind of saying, well, sure, it's going to be nearly a typical Kenny final, or so like that's definitely not the case anymore, you know.
No, and it's great to see. And actually, I don't know if I told you, I'm from Offaly, and I think there's a few Offaly people on this as well. So yeah, we'll be watching with eager eyes to see what happens. But the Shane Lowry news was great.
Yeah.
I have a few other questions coming in, but I just want to go back to the book a little bit and kind of the process of the writing and, you know, putting it all together. How did you thread it all together? Obviously, there's the sequence of the matches, but you did go back and forth, and you managed to do it in, you know, a nice way that, you know, there's an awful lot of content and information in the book, a lot of characters to meet, and, you know, even though some of them are only mentioned briefly, they're quite memorable. So how did you do that? Like, that's a huge journey. Many journalists try, as I said, to write a kind of a good biography, and it's a tough station. So what's your process?
Well, honestly, like I've been asked that question like so many times, and like, I'm going to give you the most simplest answer I can. Is I honestly don't really think about these things, Julianne. I just, like, obviously you have to think about how you're going to put the book together, but I don't really put too much thought into it. I think the one thing, I suppose, the one philosophy I have, maybe as a writer, is that, you know, I try and just have my own style, and I just follow my own kind of instincts.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I would have said this to some people in the past, like that, you know, like that some people, and it's not in any way a criticism, that I would have felt there was a few years there whereby Irish writers were trying to follow maybe American templates, and they were kind of maybe copying that example, and they might have written or might have read some book from an American writer. And, you know, to me, like, that doesn't always work. Like, you know, okay, you want to try something different, and you want to maybe have a different layout, but like, I've never really gone for that because it's not really my style. It's I don't want to be copying what other people do. So yeah, like, I suppose Last Man Standing was the first book I wrote. So as I said, like, I had a load of interviews, I had a lot of people that, you know, didn't make the book, unfortunately. But I suppose what I wanted to have was, I just wanted to have throughout the book was that thread of you were running through the championship, whereby it started, like, the book started with Dunham, reliving the hurt from the 03 final. He was maybe blamed for losing that game. Like, even the taxi stories are kind of funny, like, just to give it a bit of context. And then
very Irish kind of situation.
Yeah, but even say, like, after the 03 semi-final, where he was coming home in a taxi, and, you know, like, they'd beaten Cork, had beaten Wexford in an Ireland final or an Ireland semi-final replay, and the taxi driver said to him, he said he was complimenting how well Damien Fitzhenry played, you know, and he was sorry, I'm mixing it up here now, but this is maybe another story. But the taxi driver was complimenting Fitzhenry on how well he played, and he said, well, sure, look, at if Cork had a goalie half as good as Fitzhenry, they wouldn't have needed any replay. And he was talking to Dunlow. And then we'll say after the Munster final that year against Tip, you know, Dunlow gets into the taxi late enough, fairly fed up after losing to Waterford, and the first thing the taxi driver does is go off on a rant about how bad Cusack is as a goalie, and Dunlow just let him off and let him vent. And then he said he just basically he rang a couple of his friends in a bar, and he said look, lads, I'll be pulling up there in a taxi in 5 minutes. So he said, get the lads out the back there. He said when the taxi arrives, we're gonna turn it upside down, like. So you could see your man looking at him in the mirror saying, geez, what's the story with this guy? And he kept the story going, and he said, like, when the taxi pulled up, the driver turned around and he just stared at him, and he said, Dunlow Cusack, nice to meet you. So
you kind of think, though, your man hadn't really a notion about hurling, because he would have obviously known who Dunlow was if he had, you know, any interest really. He was just, I suppose, saying it to just say it in a way.
True, yeah. But I suppose just to finish your question, Julianne, is that, like, that was the theme, like, it was, or the theme of the book was that you know, it's the emotion running through the season, like
Yeah.
where, you know, like you're going from, you know, highs to lows to you know, back up again, you're down again. They've lost the Munster final. Then they're going in playing a huge qualifier against Tip. Don Logan kind of displaced a rib, or he hurt a rib, and you know, he had to take a painkilling injection, and then he was called for a drugs test, and he was wondering, was he going to fail that because of the injection? And then, you know, they're playing Antrim, and there's, you know, a bit of controversy going into that because of some of the comments the Antrim manager said before the game, and then all they wanted then, like, the same afternoon they played Antrim, Clare played Kilkenny, like, and like the Cork lads were praying that Kilkenny would win, like, because they wanted another crack at Kilkenny. So it's all these, I suppose, conflicting emotions and roller coaster of emotion going on, and that's what I wanted to capture. Like, so, like, you can't really plan for that. You can't say, well, you know, this is the way I'm going to do it. And even when you talk of access, like, you know, when you talk of access now compared to back then, like I remember Don Logue saying to me, you know, he said, ring me on the like the Friday before I might have been talking to him on the Monday and of the final, and he said to me, ring me on Friday morning, or ring me on Friday maybe 12 or 1 o'clock, and I said, geez, I'm not going to be ringing you on. And he said, no, I said, ring me, so I have no problem chatting to you. So I rang him, and he was in bed, like, and he was just having a bit of a rest. So, like, you know, he was telling me, like, you know, what was in his head, like, probably 48 hours out from an All-Ireland final, and, you know,
it was incredible.
And you know, you're able to capture, like, that emotion, get it down on tape to say, right, well, this is what's going through my head, and, you know, we're getting ready for war here, or we're getting ready to do whatever it takes. Like, so, you know, that's, you don't really need to write that, Julianne. You just transcribe it, and
but that's still a skill to put it all together and keep it interesting, you know, because reams and reams of, I really enjoyed it, and it's not like a book I have read before, the way it was put together. It was really interesting, and I think maybe because it was all goalkeepers, you kind of saw so many, you know, similarities between them all, and even the ones who just make maybe a small appearance in the book. Was it Ray Lele Berry? He's an interesting, you know, there was just brilliant characters, and they didn't have to be in the book for too long, but, you know, they made, you know, you got a huge impression of them. So I thought it was brilliant, and you didn't get a sense, you know, that you were just trying to transcribe. It was very emotional read. And it's funny, my husband is a drummer, and we were just talking about goalkeepers and drummers are quite similar in a way. It's noticed really if you do something wrong more than if you make a good save, you'll be remembered. But if you come out the next day and do something terrible, that's what you'll be remembered by. Whereas a forward, maybe it's different. You can redeem yourself in some ways at the next match. Yeah, no, it was very interesting. I have a couple more kind of more technical, not necessarily about the book, questions just coming in, but interesting. How does Christy feel about underage goalies? Do they get enough support when fans, parents sometimes can get so passionate? It's a good question in general for young sports people.
Yeah, it is. Like, you know, I suppose people need to understand how difficult the position can be. And I know I might be here saying, you know, making it out like that, this is a position you don't really want to play in. I would be the opposite. Like, I'm always...
No, we didn't get that from the book.
I'm always going to stand up for the goalie, but I do think, like, that one thing I would always say is, you know, like, it's often the forgotten position, like, as in, you know, you'll have forward coaches, you'll have defensive coaches, whatever, like, especially for maybe underage teams, whereby you'll have a team that's scoring, maybe they're scoring, like, for fun, like, they're scoring like 325 a game, and everything is going grand. They have a goalie that they maybe don't put a whole lot of work into. They don't really pay much heed to him or her, and then they get to a semi-final, and the goalie maybe hasn't got the same coaching level of coaching that the forwards are got or everyone else has got. He or her is doing the same training as them, even though it's a very specialised position. And then the goalie drops 3 or 4 balls into net in the semi-final. They win it by a point in a high-scoring game, and now they realise we have a problem here now. Like, the goalie's not. We're going into a final now. We're playing a good team, and now we realise, you know, we didn't put as much time into that player as as we should have, or even the keeper might take a lot of criticism before the semi-final or after the semi-final, and to say, I'm packing this up. I don't want to play this position anymore. So like that's what I would say. Look, just people to understand that if you're going to put time into players, like don't forget your goalie. And like people, I think it's only really people realise when you maybe you're struggling in a position. That's when people realise how important it is, and that it's been said for a long time that and I'm not saying it because I played there, far from it, but that you probably have to play a more skillful player in goals, and that's probably more relevant than ever now when you consider how important puckouts are and how important striking is, and precision, and decision making, and execution levels. Like the goalie is the one person that has free puck, like from from a restart. So
yeah, that was interesting in the book, like from someone now who played camogie till like first year or something in school. I wouldn't have that much technical knowledge of hurling. I thought it was mad, like the way the types of sliotar, such debate over that, and the difference on the ground and angles, and Dunham being told he wasn't positioning himself like exactly right, and how they can see, they're putting Waterford putting Shanahan in front of him at a deliberate angle so that he wouldn't see you. But really interesting. But like it's a full-time job. I don't know how players, now it's probably even more technical with all the stats that you have. Do you think that it's still enjoyable now with all of that sort of, I suppose, technical side creeping into it?
Well, it is, but there's probably a lot more focus on. From a goalie's perspective now, the focus really is on puckouts, on striking.
Yeah.
Like, it's not really like, you go back to the way the game has gone. Like, I know it was a winter championship last year, but very few goals. The goal rate has come right down. And I think keepers now, their stats are more or less judged on their puckouts as opposed to anything. Like, they're expected to do everything else anyway.
Yeah.
It's not like before, even from a coaching perspective, whereby if I was coaching keepers like 10 years ago, like it was very much shot stopping related or handling. Now the primary focus is nearly on puckouts, because that's because it's not that it wasn't important in the past, but it's just become so important now, and it's become like even the way the game has gone, Julianne, everything is based so much around puckouts and your success rate on your puckout. So,
and everyone has an opinion on it as well.
And everybody, just to finish, it's not just your own puckout. There's so much focus on the opposition puckout. So like everything now is every keeper, every player studied, they're analysed to death. So like if there's any trend there, the opposition will be on it. And the goalie, got to try and get around that, because like I suppose really often what you'd find as well is puckouts go wrong, and the easiest thing in the world to do is blame the keeper when keeper's only one part on the chessboard, like the moving parts. If the moving parts aren't working outside, especially now the way space is compressed so much, keeper can only do so much. But yet he or she is the easiest person to blame if it doesn't go right.
Yeah, and you can see that in the book. They often are the one that takes the brunt. Why did you not put yourself into the book? Was that a kind of your own story? Was that a deliberate decision, or were you never going to do that?
No, look at it. I wouldn't. That's just something I was never comfortable with anyway. Well, I ended up kind of having to write about myself in another book, but that was another story. But no, I look at it. It was really, I was kind of there as an observer, and I was there as to try and maybe, I suppose, tell the story. It wasn't my story, it was nothing to do with me really. But I suppose, look at that's something I would have referred to before, is that being a goalie and being able to relate to a lot of these guys, I think like that. I think they maybe appreciated that as well, that that they were talking to somebody, one of their own maybe, and that they were talking to somebody who understood, and it wasn't going to be, I wasn't going to judge them, maybe like other people might have judged them, and that's not being critical of other people, but I could maybe understand what they were going through, and like every keeper's been there, like where you're like, it's like, you know, like I'd say, you know, I've played games whereby it's torturous, like, you know, you're maybe doesn't go well for you early on, you've conceded a few bad goals, and you're saying to yourself, if we lose this, there's only one person being blamed here, and that's me, like, and you're trying to kind of get those thoughts out of your head, and you're trying to focus on the next ball and on your next task. And like, you know, like I remember there's one story that I played a Munster club final one year live on TV, and I for some reason I'd always be really prepared, but I just completely miscalculated the conditions, and I didn't actually have enough clothes, and I went out onto the pitch. It was against Ballygunner in '99, and I went out onto the pitch, and this icy breeze hit me, like, and I said, where did this come out of? And I was cold, and even the team photo for that game, I'm not in it, because I didn't go down to I was up at the goal trying to I was trying to do press ups, I was warming myself up, and I tell you, Julianne, we played with it was kind of hurricane, we played with it in the first half, and my hands were so cold. I went into the dressing room at half time, I doused them in boiling water.
Wow.
And the second half, and my hands effectively froze. So like, I've no problem admitting it. With 20 minutes to go that day, I was saying my prayers, just blow the whistle, blow the final whistle, and just get me out of here alive, like. And that's what I was thinking. I wasn't thinking, you know, like, I'm gonna be the guy who's gonna win this game, or all I wanted to do that day was get out alive without having dropped the ball into the net, like, you know. So
yeah, and you can see a few players in the book saying that, like, I looked really calm, but inside I was absolutely terrified. Like, there's did you have any feedback maybe from players afterwards? You know, the Dublin hurling story is an interesting one. Was there any kind of did anyone refer to that afterwards, or do you think it had any impact, or did it give people an insight into, you know, the troubles they were having?
Yeah, I don't know, did I ever speak to Brendan McLaughlin afterwards, you know? I met him once, I think maybe a good few years later, and I honestly can't remember, but I do think, like, that at the time, maybe some of the players that I think that they would have appreciated, maybe, that this is something that I look back on maybe in 20 years time, or I look back on this when my career is done, and I'll appreciate it more. That maybe at times, you know, that when you're in the moment, and, you know, all you're doing is you're playing what's in front of you, and you're playing what's ahead of you. But I do think, like, a couple of them would have said it to me, like, that, you know, look, I'm delighted I was involved in that book, and, you know, it's something that maybe at the time I probably didn't understand. Not that I didn't understand, but I didn't maybe appreciate it as much. But, like, that they're delighted that they were part of it. Now look, at maybe some of them might have thought differently, but I tried to be honest with every player. I wasn't going to, you know, sugarcoat stuff. I wasn't going to. I was going to tell their story, and some of the stories that might have been a bit close to the bone, that might have been a bit hard hitting. But, like, you know, I would have always said to, you know, to players, look, are you happy that that's gone in? And they would say, yeah, no problem. Or actually, I'll tell you, on Don Logan once said, you said, look, take out some of that bad language there, will you? So that was maybe, that might have been little things here and there, but no, look, in fairness to the players, I'll forever be indebted to those players for giving me their time and giving me that access. Like, and even, like, you know, when I think back on it, Julianne, like, some of them were, like, incredible, like, with how they facilitated me, like, or,
yeah, you know, can imagine.
Would have been so helpful, like, and would have gone beyond the call of duty, like, in terms of what they did for me, like, you know, and you know, I really will never forget them for it, you know.
Yeah, but it's a real legacy piece to them and to goalkeepers and to you, you know, and it was such a good idea, you know, the idea for the book, and it was so unique as well. I have a comment here, must compliment Christy on the quality of characters in this book and a great insight into their psyche. Yeah, that's really it, isn't it? It was a real unique insight. And I thought some of the dressing room, you know, management kind of battles were interesting. Like, you would assume sometimes that, you know, everyone wants the same thing and this is the logical thing to do, but not necessarily always the case when management are looking at things totally differently than players. It was interesting, you know, that they, you know, they wouldn't give the guy in Antrim his you know, a day off to do his goalkeeper training, and you know, those kind of things seem mad looking back now.
Yeah, no, definitely. And look, I think that players probably wouldn't feel that they have, you know, they have a forum to air those opinions now, because, you know, it's just a different world, and I don't like, I'm not making it out like that, you know, that the lads back in the day were like anarchists or they do what they wanted, like, but I do think like that we've maybe lost that innocence a little bit too, you know, whereby, you know, and like, I'm involved in it myself, I understand the way it has to be now. It's a different world, and, you know, it's not maybe as open.
Forgiven, maybe.
Exactly. That's the brilliant word, like that. It has to be managed that bit way differently. But like, when you look back in the book, I suppose really that those guys as well, they were very independently minded. They were very strong thinkers on the game. They weren't afraid to express their opinions, and some of them, like, you know, were really putting their neck on the line. That they were saying, you know, like, I'll tell you a classic about Liam Dunham, actually, that he was, the book came out in, I'd say, September 05, and he'd kind of some choice words to say about the county board at the end of the 04 season. So he said, it was funny when myself and Timmy Hoolan went up and we did a goalkeeping session up in Gort in Galway, maybe a week before that final, and I gave a couple of the books to Timmy and to Liam, like, and Liam said to me, "Geez, I'll be keeping that book as low key as I can for the next couple of weeks." He said, if some of the county board guys are reading that, he said, like, he was actually the captain of Galway in the 05 final.
Right.
He said, if some of those guys read that, so he said, I'm in trouble, like, so. But look, he was still willing to do that for me, like, he was still willing to.
Yeah, he knew, you know, what he was saying. That was a really interesting one, and it painted a kind of a picture on itself. You didn't have to say too much, I suppose, to get the point across. I had one question actually that came in, and I'm conscious we're running up to the hour now from when we started, so thanks everyone, and I'm delighted we can see you still. So this one came in before. Christy O'Connor, many congratulations on your wonderful success of your book and indeed all your writing. Do you think the introduction of the yellow slitter has been a success? Would you have liked to use it in your time?
Well, I know we've spoken a lot about him, but like, Dunloe was very much behind the yellow slitter, like, and he does make a very good point, like that. One point he's consistently made, like that, if you look at a white slitter is the same colour as an Irish sky. You know, like, there's very few blue skies, you know, for hurling matches, unfortunately, especially games that are played during the league or that, and like, you know, it goes up against that sky, it can be hard to track. So obviously I haven't played with a yellow slitter, I can't comment on it, but I suppose you can make the analogy with tennis, in that they used to play with white balls in tennis, and it was actually David Attenborough, the esteemed
broadcaster,
you know, like, documentarian, like, he actually was behind the change, because he was a producer, he was one of the main people in BBC, and he felt that the audiences couldn't really see the white ball, so he was one of the people who made a push for the green tennis ball. So
that's interesting. I didn't know that. Good table quiz question.
Like, there has been like change. We say, like, there was a time where the slitter was kind of like, they used to call it tan color. It was brown, and then they changed to white for maybe TV audiences, and like, it's scientifically proven that luminous green is the most visible colour for players and supporters. So
Interesting.
there's a reason behind it. Like, and in fairness to Don Logue, like, you know, he doesn't do anything without having his research done. Like, and there's numerous cases, Julianne, whereby even in ice hockey, like there was a stage there when ice hockey became really popular in America. Like for a while they actually had this glowing puck, which the puck would glow because it was purely for they wanted to make ice hockey a more popular game. Ice hockey was really more known for kind of brawls and scraps than the quality of the game, and that was one of the reasons that are behind that glowing puck, was that they just felt for new viewers, new audiences, and they were trying to expand the game in America with all these new franchises, and they just felt if people could see the puck, they'd understand the game better and they'd maybe get to like it a bit better. So, you know, there's a reason for the green stitter. I've never played with it, but I think the reasons are sound.
Yeah, no, interesting. I thought it was an interesting question to come in because there was a lot of debate about it last winter. I've a load more things I didn't get through, and a few on each of the characters. But as I said, we might hopefully do another one at some point live in the museum. Would be lovely. Yeah. And it would be a lovely one in Croke Park, you know, particularly, you know, that obviously Croke Park is referenced a lot in it. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you everyone for bearing with us as well with the technical problems, but I think we still managed it. I'm coming a dab hand at all of that. I really appreciate it, and it was a brilliant book. We will be announcing the next book tomorrow, which is, but I'm going to tell you guys who stayed with us now. It's Relentless by Mary White, and it's about the Cork ladies football. I thought we should get some ladies football in, because we've had, I suppose, just to change it up. I'm trying to do maybe different topics every month. So we've had some history books, and then Christy's, I suppose, was more of a look at goalkeepers and hurling, and this one is going to go to ladies football. So we'll try and change up the themes every month to keep it interesting, I suppose. So everyone is just coming in with the Q&A there and saying thanks so much, Christy. I really enjoyed it. If you missed any of it, or you want to listen back or tell anyone, we'll put the chat up on the website as well in the book club section. If anyone hasn't read The Club, also by Christy, that has been recommended to me too. So we'll hopefully come back to you for that one maybe in a couple of months, Christy. But I really appreciate it, and thanks for sticking with the technology. Sorry, I'm just publishing a few comments there. And if anyone has anything that they want to suggest for the book club, just email me, bookclub@crokepark.ie. So thanks once again, Christy, and good night, everybody.